Hey, morning.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine, thanks. How are you?
Very well here in Cartagena, in Colombia. Enjoying.
And Barbados today is extremely hot. So anybody who is in a place that's a little chilly, I don't want to make you feel too bad, but it's extremely hot, and I wish we could not trade places, but share some of, I share some of the warm, you share some of the chills. So we can begin as soon as you are ready. I'm seeing we have
Yes, and in the previous event, Alison, I made the introduction for the person who is in charge for the opening. Then I came back and then I introduced the moderator, and the moderator introduced the speakers. Is this great for you?
It's quite fine for me. Quite fine. So.
Okay, I think we have a translation here
Yes.
for those of you that need translation for English to Spanish, Spanish to English. You have to press interpretation that is below in the screen. ¿Cómo estás, Alessandro? Muchas gracias por estar ahí. Just one quick question, Alison. Alessandro should speak in English, or he can speak in Spanish?
He can speak in Spanish. We have our interpretation.
Okay, great.
You know, I prefer the English, but
okay. So, Alessandro, you decide if you speak in Spanish or in English.
He says I speak English. So we're happy with that.
I think we have a problem with Alessandro, because you are perhaps if you, Alejandro, quizás si pones los auriculares o algo así, porque estás desmuteado, pero igual a veces sucede que si le pones la conexión de auriculares. The other speakers are in the room, Alison? Diana, quizás tú los conozcas. Camille, hi, how are you, Camille?
Yes, Camille is there.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Ramsey is there.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Keith was there because he said hello.
I saw Keith a short while ago.
Yeah. I don't see it, but maybe he's connected with another name. So Alessandro needs to be on mute by the moderator. Okay, yeah, Keith is there. And Adrian is the one. Adrian, are you there?
Hello, everybody.
Oh, hi. Hello, Alessandro.
Yeah, you have muted me, and also I have a problem with the camera because you're not allowing me to stream on.
That was at the beginning, but not now.
You are co-host now, so you should be able to. So try the camera again, Alessandro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, there you go. So
right.
I don't need a Spanish translation.
Okay, but
Yeah.
All right.
for those of you that need, you have to press the button interpretation below.
Okay.
And Adrian, I don't see Adrian.
No, I don't see Adrian.
Ramsey is a speaker, isn't it?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I can speak. Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
Ramsey. How are you?
I'm good. How is everyone?
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Wish I could be in person in the sunshine.
Yeah.
I think all of us wanted to be in Barbados right now, but
Yeah.
Well, at least here I am in Cartagena. It's better than in Uruguay. I am interested in the event, but finish it, I will go to the beach. So I am ready to do so.
Nice.
This is the important, the advantage to be in a virtual meeting, that we can have a suite, but just ready for the beach at the same time. Okay, Sony 5. Perhaps we can start, Alison.
Hello to ALES President, Yolanda Torriani. Hola, Yolanda.
Hasta ahí.
Adrian is trying to join. He said he will be with us shortly.
Sorry?
Adrian said he's trying to join. He'll be with us shortly. He just signed it on.
Okay. Our president, Yolanda Torriani, is saying that she is not allowed to say nothing or to turn on the camera. Perhaps you may help her with that. Sí, Yolanda, le he pedido que si pueden.
Sí, ya lo pedimos.
Hola, ahora sí.
Un saludo, encantada. Javier, mi queridísima amiga, que ya pronto nos veremos para gozar de la playa, de las olas y el mar. Un saludo a cada uno de ustedes. Y Javier, pues, todos decimos, todos los días está en distintos países. Por favor, pásanos el dato.
Gracias, Yolanda.
Lindo, Tayana, encantada de verte.
Un gusto, Yolanda.
Thank you
Yes.
and welcome.
Alison.
Hoy día es una fecha importante. Saludos, Alison.
Yes, thank you. Welcome.
Hello, Alison.
Hi.
Alison, let us know when we can start.
I think we should start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ok, muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes a todos los amigos de América Latina, del Caribe, de otros países que se están uniendo a esta transmisión. Este es el 6º evento que hacemos en este ciclo 2021 y es un gran gusto tener hoy día a este panel de expertos y especialistas en el tema de industria creativa o economía naranja, haciendo foco en particular en nuestros amigos y colegas del Caribe. Esta secuencia de eventos ha sido producto y gracias al esfuerzo y el apoyo técnico y económico de Caribbean Export y también en los pasados eventos de la Cámara Argentina de Comercio. Así que muchas gracias a ambas instituciones por la organización. Hoy día, como dije, la bienvenida va a ser, el opening va a estar a cargo de nuestra querida amiga y colega Alison Francis, que es especialista de servicios en Caribbean Export. Así que muy bienvenida, Alison. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Javier, and good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the Executive Director of Caribbean Export, I'm very pleased to welcome everyone to this very important panel discussion on the orange economy. Though the last session of our ALES talks, I think it is very important, not last but least, but also very important as all the other discussions that we have had over the month of October and now leading into November. As we specifically focused on the Caribbean, we do recognize the importance of the orange economy. And I believe that the COVID pandemic had pushed us to make a pivot or a turn, or forced us to take that leap that we all had to do for some period of time. So I'm really looking forward to our expert team of panelists that we have, and thanks everyone for accepting to be part of the panel discussion today. And we're all friends, and really looking forward to a very fruitful discussion. Caribbean Export, as said by Javier, we are very pleased to partner with ALES as we've used this discussion, not just today, all our ALES discussions, all the collaboration that we've had as a crucial element in our service sector development and for continuing deepening of relationships between the Caribbean and Latin America. This action is also funded as Caribbean Export implements our 11th EDF Regional Private Sector Development Program. And so we also want to thank the European Union for the support to allow us to be able to undertake this great sponsorship. I said this creative sector is an engine of growth. It's very important for the Caribbean. And we need to look, as we undertake this digital pivot, how we can better infuse innovation, beyond the creativity, technology. We have always discussed that the Caribbean has no limit in creative content, but it's how we package that content. And as we had discussed, several times, and we had in our opening paragraph, we speak of how we can monetize. We know a large part of that is the issue of monetizing our intellectual property, how people view our intellectual property, etc., in the creative sector. But we believe that I have a very good panel of expertise that come both from an economic background as well as a creative background that will be able to address some of these crucial issues in terms of how we are to better monetize the creative sector, how we become more innovative utilization of technology, and so that we can expand the creative sector in the way that we should. We speak of diversification, and for Caribbean exporters, focus on the non-creative, non-tourism sector. As we speak of non-tourism, I think it's very difficult from a Caribbean perspective to pull away entirely from tourism. So how then do we continue as we seek in the development of the services sector, the development of the Caribbean region, that way, or the way in which the creative sector can play that crucial role that it has always played, but we have not necessarily captured it, monetized it sufficiently. So from Caribbean Export, we are very pleased, and we have had the support of the Caribbean Network of Services Coalitions. We've had the support of our board of directors in terms of guiding us to having a discussion on this very important topic for the region. So to all our panelists, I look forward to the exchanges, and thanks again for agreeing to be part of the panel. So, moderator Tiana, I hand over to you.
Muchas gracias, Alison. Es un placer contar contigo hoy. Y como decía, este evento es de especial relevancia porque es en un sector de mucho interés, no solo en el Caribe, sino en América Latina. Y en esta secuencia de eventos que hemos hecho en ALES en el último mes y medio, hemos tocado uno de ellos, cuáles son los sectores que han tenido una mayor digitalización en el último tiempo y cuáles tienen las mayores potencialidades. En nuestro libro, la nueva era de los servicios globales, nosotros tocamos uno de esos sectores que es precisamente la e-creativity, que es el nombre que nosotros le hemos puesto a este sector. Pero permítame contarle una anécdota de lo que sucedió en uno de estos paneles en el último ALES. Es que un chico, en este caso de Uruguay, está metido en el tema de lo que son los NTF, Non-Fungible Token, que para muchos de nosotros es algo sumamente disruptivo, pero seguro para quienes están en esto de la e-creativity o industria naranja, seguramente no. Eso demuestra que los artistas, los creativos, los diseñadores tienen una gran oportunidad de ingresar al mercado internacional, creando arte y pudiendo aprovechar esto de las oportunidades de, por ejemplo, la blockchain. Este tipo de obras hoy día no solo están vendiendo por millones a nivel internacional, sino que un ejemplo práctico lo tuvimos acá, como un emprendedor como ustedes, que está en esto del tema de diseño gráfico, hoy día vive y trabaja brindando servicios globales desde uno de nuestros países, haciendo miles de dólares. Así que los invito a explorar esas posibilidades. Dicho lo cual, damos la bienvenida a nuestra querida amiga Diana Mora, que es, además de la presidenta de la Coalición de Servicios de República Dominicana, es actualmente la vicepresidenta de ALES. Así que muchas gracias, Diana, por estar nuevamente acá con nosotros, y adelante.
Thank you, Javier. I will try to run this mostly in English because most of the, well, all of the speakers, the panelists are English speaking. So we have, like Alison already said, a very good group of experts as panelists. We will have Dr. Keith Nurse. Keith has a long history of doing studies related to the creative industry from the OECDs to a lot of the Caribbean entities, and is currently the president of Sir Arthur Lewis College in St. Lucia. Camille Selvon is also an entrepreneur in the animation area, and she directs the program of animation at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Adrian Auger is a creative consultant, has worked for the Landmark Group. Ramsey McBean is a producer specializing in animated feature films, has a lot of experience in the UK and in Europe, and also does some work with the Caribbean. Alessandro Biogio is a business development manager at Dudus Game from El Salvador. So as you can see, many diverse and interesting perspectives. So we will start with Dr. Nurse. How do you see the prospect of the digital creative economy for the Latin America and the Caribbean region? Keith?
Hi, how are you? Pleasure.
Hi, yes, great.
Thank you for facilitating and hosting. Yeah, I think we are at a very interesting point, and I think that's, Alison really provided us with a useful lead-in. I've recently published a paper for the World Trade Organization looking at the digital creative economy. And I don't think people really fully understand, what's happening. So that it's a process of digitalization, which we all are familiar with, which is that, a lot of creative content is now distributed, but also produced on devices that are all networked, and so on. But there's another layer, let's call it the institutional layer, that is also informed by or shaped by the digitalization processes. So, for example, for the countries that, particularly for large countries with large home markets, issues like data localization, the capacity of the country to ensure that the data that is collected on their populations can be used for or used by their own firms at home and not just by the global platforms exclusively, becomes a basis for the creation of startup companies in the domestic jurisdiction. So for many small countries, we haven't even begun talking about data localization because in many respects, we don't have the industrial capacity to exploit that area. And it's becoming a really important area for trade policy, negotiation, and so forth. And so, so for small countries, we are increasingly reliant on large firms and platforms to deliver our digital content. That immediately means then that you are not in control of your data. And data monetization is the fastest growing area of monetization in the creative sector. So then, because now content itself has, in many respects, is becoming the loss leader. You don't make money on selling content anymore in some areas. You make money on the way in which it is leveraged through other sectors. So for example, this is already the case in the Caribbean. So we make most of our money from things like festival tourism. So it's the relationship between our creative sector and tourism that is the biggest source of income for the creative sector in the Caribbean. It's not the festivals as standalone, it's not the concerts as standalone. So that's an example of an area of cross-fertilization that has already been happening. What's happening in the current context is that, so for example, with the new technologies, it's the sectors that are rising the fastest are those that are composite sectors. So animation and new things like esports, meaning that they're a combination of what we used to call sectors. So people are now having concerts inside of a game. All right, using Fortnite, for example, which is one of the largest gaming platforms, to offer a musical concert. Now, these ideas would have been been conceivable even a few years ago. And what COVID has done is accelerated this process. And so now what is now required is not a view of seeing the creative arts as a standalone or seeing creative content in silos. So music and theater and film and so on are no longer to be viewed as standalone, separate, siloed areas. And so if we're still training people in those silos, and if we haven't created a framework that allows for this area of convergence, then we are now basically behind the curve. We're still thinking of creative industries and cultural industries as standalone. Now, the concept of the orange economy itself is premised on a notion of on convergence and of composite. So the orange economy is not a one-to-one replica of the creative economy or the creative industries. We need to understand that. So when we use the term the orange economy, we're talking about something that is more transversal in its makeup. And this is where creativity drives innovation. And we are underinvesting in creativity in our part of the world. If you look at the little bit of data that we have on the sectors, we are not investing in training people to be creative producers, nor are we training people to be creative entrepreneurs. And on top of that, we just don't have the infrastructure in terms of the intellectual property facilitation, or what is now being called digital intelligence, which will tap into things like blockchain technologies, AI, virtual reality, Internet of Things, and the list goes on. So that's my opening salvo. So thank you.
All right, great. Camille, given that context, those challenges of technology and digitalization, animation is a relatively new sector for the Caribbean. What do you think it needs to become a very competitive sector for the region?
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk today. I'd love to share something very short. Am I able to do that? Are you all seeing? Yes? I'm not hearing anyone, so I'm
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is very short, and what it will demonstrate, it's just 4 slides, because it will impact everything that we're speaking, even impact what Dr. Nils just said there, because there is a revolution that is happening regarding the digital future of the Caribbean. The challenge is, or the reality of it is that it is not formalized. It is not formalized in the classroom. It is an underground movement that Mr. Javier just spoke about regarding NFTs and the fact that, in a way, innovation now is actually driving creativity. So we may have to shift the way we think about things. So what you're going to see is a 1 minute 30 long show reel, but I needed to show that to kind of make the points that I'm going to make. So we start with this and then I'll move on. Okay, so what you're seeing here is actually 20 years of work, and it's important that I showed this before before I speak, because I needed to discuss a few things. For instance, our history in Trinidad and Tobago, as a lot of you in the audience will know, is that of oil and gas. So what did it take to get here? It meant that we had to sort of go against what you would consider the normal, sorry, I'm just trying to find back the file. Hold on 1 second. Right, I'm going to share again, because then that will guide me. Right, so I had to go against what the normal spaces for education, right? Because we were taught in schools the traditional forms of education, like medicine, you know, even technology, even down to agriculture. That's normal in the Caribbean space. So to get us to a point where we see technology as the future, the entire education system needed to be addressed differently. So there needed to be a whole awareness and sensitization. The next thing that needed to happen was inclusion in the curriculum, because again, historically, our education system formats, it's not suited to these kind of changes, right? The other thing, of course, is to include it on the tertiary level. So on the tertiary level, the challenge we have is that, again, it's based it's based on the traditional education formats that is not very suitable to digitization or to exponential technology, because the whole idea of animation and gaming is that it is exponential, it is constantly moving and shifting. So what does that mean? We had to approach at the University of Trinidad and Tobago a process where because one, we had to catch up with the rest of the world. So we had to allow our students to learn while they are doing, because after about 15 years of doing it, the complaint from the sector was that when the students come out of the universities, they are not ready for work. So we had to shift it, and we had to shift that, make that shift quickly, where we allowed industry to work with our students, and they got this sort of hands-on training in order to become part of the sector. So it is a success story. But what it did was really, we had to really fight against what was normal, what was considered normal in society in order for that to change. It also meant that we had to go out of the normal funding space when it comes to academia, and I'm going to stop sharing now. When it comes to academia, we had to move away from the traditional spaces of funding, because in order to prove to let's say the education sector that this thing is viable, we have no background to base this on. We have no proof. There's no proof to say that gaming and animation is going to make a lot of money. So you have to step out of that. And thank God we had organizations like Caribbean Export Development Agency and IDB to kind of give that kind of support for us to move forward. And because of that, we've been able to really create a case study. And I'd love to talk to Dr. Nurse about this, because to me, it is a case study whereby we had to kind of move away from traditional norms to create an environment that embraced technology and embraced the future.
Okay, Camille taught us about how much have taken to the region to come where we are at this moment, but the reality of the market are shifting from us as well. So, Adrian, how do we develop now the right strategy to get product to markets? How do we engage now that we cannot go in person, that the reality, that the pandemic have shifted the reality for us? How are those business models, those strategies that we need to develop?
Thank you, Taina, and thank you, Camille, and thank you, Dr. Nurse, for setting the base for what I think I would like to add to this discussion, which is both necessary and timely. I want to point out that traditional creatives who may well be ahead of the curve with respect to their own craft, may be behind the curve with respect to technology, the digital space. And so one of the critical things that has to happen is a deeper and more pervasive understanding of the platforms, the formats, and particularly, which has been touched on earlier, the monetization options. Because especially in the COVID environment, people have seen their incomes literally disappear. And where this continues to be the case, and may well do so, because the world has changed forever and it's not going back to what it was, the encounters between consumer and producer may well be more distanced as the technology becomes increasingly sophisticated or more pervasive or whatever. So we need to, as a Caribbean community, find ways to cross that divide between the people who are doing things and the people who are able to project them further into the market than just the traditional creatives. On the other hand, you have a new generation of tech-savvy young people who may be not so far ahead in terms of their craft, but who are very much at home and are not migrants to the technology. So you have two sets of strengths. And I think one of the fundamental strategies has to be bringing those two communities together, those who are further ahead on the tech curve and those who are further ahead on the creative curve. And without that, I don't think that we're going to really be able to build a viable community anytime soon. That suggests then that collaborations between content creators and technology providers or technology brokers or managers of platforms or owners of software or even editors of content need to be more, those collaborations need to be stronger, they need to be more viable, they need to be more accessible, so that those persons who really are adept at their craft do not necessarily have to become just as deeply involved in the technological or digital side of what they are doing, but can actually say to an intermediary, come take my stuff, which I'm very good at producing, and take it to the world. So the idea is that while hybrid competencies, that is people who can do both, would be wonderful, the truth is if you're going to excel, if you're going to achieve excellence in your area of creativity, you need to devote several thousands of hours every week to that, or every month to that. And you can't develop the technical competence at the same time without some form of sacrifice. So if the Caribbean is going to be a place of excellent creative output and excellent creative product, we are going to need collaborations between content creators and the owners or the managers or the gurus of the technological side, to allow both of the left brain and the right brain, so to speak, of the sector to develop. So the hybrid competencies, I think bridging the creative and the tech worlds is going to be extremely important. So, and that has to happen in a way that recognizes the need for both, but discourages silos, in the sense of you have to create collaborations and combinations of skills. So one of the things that I think is also important in support of that is the development of intermediary service providers, people who actually become brokers of both technology and content, so that you have the possibility to build a digital infrastructure around really exceptional product possibilities, really exceptional content possibilities. The statement was made earlier about the tech leading the creativity. I think we need to spend a little time examining that, because in my world, the tech is the tool, the creativity is the original substance of the thing. And while some of that is going to be true maybe in gaming, I think in more traditional aspects of creativity, particularly arts and entertainment, where I make my living, we are going to need brokers who allow us to do what we do, learn some new stuff, but also remain focused on creating really the exceptional product quality that the world market needs. And that's the market that we need to go to. So intermediary service providers, brokers, I think are going to be very, very important. And in that respect, I just want to touch on the work that Keith Nurse is doing at the Sir Arthur's Community College, opening up a whole new spectrum of activity for young learners. That is very, very important. But I hazard a guess that he is doing this in the absence of a more global strategy at national level or even at regional level as to how this repositions the Caribbean region as some center of excellence, either in the production or creation or marketing or digitization or monetization of these new products. So I think we need to look at that, and I want to speak about that a little bit more later on. So agencies like the agencies bringing us today's wonderful summit need to see themselves as conduits of resources, not so much occupiers of space, but conduits of resources, especially business support services, which allow resources to come more directly and more speedily, and don't get diverted into overhead, which does not involve the actual practitioners, the actual producers of creative product and service. So collectively, our role as you know, the enlightened ones, or the leaders, or whatever it is we fancy ourselves to be in this critical conversation, our role has to be to help to build the railroad. I think the music industry is a critical example. In the music industry today, there is a process of making a hit and building a star and getting a platinum record and winning a Grammy. We have to study that in all the other subsectors of the creative arts so that we know how we build champions. Nobody has that formula because we haven't studied, well, I say nobody, but very few people have that formula because we haven't really studied how the market works. How does the market make a hit? How does the market make a #1 song, or how do you get a Caribbean play to Broadway or the West End in London? Nobody's talking about that, and that's where the market is, the traditional market is. If you're not going to go that route, then how do you really get it into YouTube? How do you get it into all of the other platforms, Netflix, for example, which are means of getting product monetized? So the other last thing I'd say on this particular point is if the artist is concentrating on creating the product, and that is vital for quality, and that is vital to maintain a premium product, then someone has to help to bring the market to the product. In our corner of the woods, we're actually building now bespoke entertainment experiences connected to tourism, because that's where some purchasing power exists. And we are creating premium product for a very high-end premium market that can afford it and works at our smaller scale. So high-end, intimate, quality, bespoke, custom, these are some of the words I think that apply to the creative content that the Caribbean is well positioned to produce and linked to tourism, not mass market necessarily, but certainly premium market. And I believe that that's the way that we can continue to transform within the sector. I'm going to stop there.
All right, so we have heard a lot about digitalization and about if we go directly to the buyer or if we engage with them. Streaming, of course, is one of the ways of getting to market that has increased substantially during the pandemic. Latin America and the Caribbean is the fastest growing streaming market for music, and it's a leading one for also for consumption of animation and video games. So how can we tap into that, the growth, Ramsey, how do we tap into the growth of streaming, and how the Caribbean and Latin America can seize those opportunities in that segment of the market?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I think like the world is, as everybody said, the world's changing at such a rapid rate, and even people working in the business are seeing it change before their eyes and finding talent in places that have never been available to anybody before because of COVID and everything. So, I think the impact of streaming is on multiple levels. Like the change, the big shift in the business model is the value of an individual user on a streaming device compared to like a theatrical movie ticket, and how long-term that revenue can sustain itself in a bigger streaming model. Because of that existed pre-pandemic and was kind of like the thing that hacked the system really. And then when you add the pandemic on top of that, it's become like a massive source of entertainment for everybody, but also a massive source of revenue for studios. And, any studio that had a streaming platform, whether that's Netflix, Disney, Paramount, we have Paramount Plus. If you had a more traditional pipeline of distribution, like say a Sony, you struggled in the pandemic. You struggled for the last few years because you haven't had your normal revenue sources. So everybody's now looking at how to see if theatrical is going to come back, but primarily stabilize their businesses through streaming. And now what that means for people in the Caribbean and Latin America is that, first of all, that there's a massive amount of content required in order to keep people interested in paying their £5 a month or $10 a month or whatever it is that streaming costs. So that demand for content is driven by this need to constantly be showing stuff to people that's new, and they're going to binge watch everything, and then you have to have something else. And this type of viewership that's happening in behavior is driving that content demand. And to the point that was made earlier about like the value of the data related to what people are watching is also massively valuable. So like the business models of these streaming companies is actually yet to be seen, because the amount they're spending on content is actually disproportionate to the amount of revenue they're making from subscriptions. So there must be another piece of their business model that from a data standpoint that is kind of a little bit behind the scenes. And that really is proving itself across all of the different streaming platforms. So, you know, on the one side, you've got this increase in demand for content, which is driving loads more talent to be sucked in, loads more need for talent. Like in my previous job at Technicolor, we were the largest service providing company in the world. We had in animation services, we had about 2,000 employees, and we could see that our workload over the next 3 years was going to require us to double the amount of people working for that company in order to deliver the amount of content needed. So immediately there's already a massive crunch happening on the talent side of things across the world right now, where there genuinely is not enough animation talent to make the amount of stuff being made like that. So talk about job opportunity, removing borders of countries and anything like that, like the digital age has done. Like there is a huge demand of people who can animate. And on Paw Patrol, the movie that I just finished, we had people animating in Brazil on that movie, and the movie was made in Montreal. So, and they were working from home and they were fully animating on a feature film. So there is this massive opportunity provided out there by this demand for content. And then on the localized level, in terms of IP development, you know, the value of local content for local people to want to keep buying a subscription for a service is also a part of the business model that exists, that is now very new. Like usually localized content wasn't seen as being that viably commercial because, you know, how many people are really going to watch it? But if it's able to drive lots of people to keep coming back to the service within a country or within a region, then it becomes much more valuable. And probably the best example of that is the recent Jorge Gutierrez show, Maya and the Three, that came out. You know, it's Mexican American creator, but he, you know, Jorge has been making animated films for a long time, but the change in the business model allowed him to create a mini series like that has never been able to be financed before, to a quality that's never been able to be achieved before. And it was something that it was a culture outside of American culture that it was inspired by, which is also something that hasn't really been invested in before in that way. And like that is like a real signature of how localized content can be successful and also allow the rest of the world to enjoy it. Like, I'm not Mexican, I loved watching Maya and the Three. So, you know, it's a way in which you can create stuff that's specific to your culture, but have the rest of the world have a window into it if it's authentic and well made. So yeah, that's my spiel on that. Obviously happy to answer any questions, or we can move on to the next thing.
Right. Thank you. Alessandro, what do you think Latin America and the Caribbean has to offer to content distributors, to publishers that are interested in what the region is creating?
Well, hello, everybody. Well, that's a very good question. I think Latin America and the Caribbean has to offer a lot of things as a whole. And one of the first things that comes to mind is our culture, right? We are a melting pot of different ideas, people who migrated from Europe, from Asia, and the people that come from like this Italian, Spanish roots. I have Italian roots myself. So we think differently. And we live in El Salvador. And for example, in our country, we are 7 million people, but we have 2 million people living in the US. So we kind of live like in the US, and we understand the US culture. So we have a lot of things to propose to those markets. For example, during the pandemic, we had this great opportunity because, to be honest, the pandemic was, I think it will sound really bad to say it this way, but it was a good time for us, the pandemic, because we managed to get a good publisher and a good distributor in the US, and they were looking for content, as Ramsey was saying. I mean, these streaming platforms, they are demanding for more content, and we are in the video game industry, and despite of all the video games that come out every day, people are always looking for new games every single day, every single week. They are expecting new games on all the other platforms. So they were looking for content, and one of them were working with Latin American countries, people from Brazil. So they started contacting developers from the region, and they got these two projects, the one from our studio and one from Brazil, where they found these great games that made a lot of sense to the US market despite being in Latin America. And they were like, they were like, wow, this is something that we have never seen. And we thought that Latin America as a region, or the Caribbean, were only freelancers that work on freelance projects that didn't create our own productions. So this is something that we are showing them. And for example, in our project, there is a legend. His name is David Brevik. He's the creator of Diablo. If you know about games, that's a huge game. And he was the creator of Diablo back in the 80s, 90s. And he was really surprised to see what Latin America has to offer. So we have this melting pot, but I think it was Mr. Adrian Auger that was talking about this. When I work with studios as a consultant, they usually ask me, Alessandro, what are the most important positions in a studio? And I always tell them, well, you have a tech savvy, you need a tech savvy, you need someone in that knows about art as a whole, and you need a business guy. And I think that that's the thing that we are lacking in Latin America, because we work on IPs that come from the US or from Europe, but it's very hard to put our IPs, our intellectual property, in the US or the European market. And it's because we don't really understand how the markets work. So this is something that we should work on. And this is what I wanted to share at this time.
Okay, thank you. Keith, there are a lot of discussions at the WTO and other policy levels on how to facilitate services. Still, we have a long way to go. Last session, we had the US coalition talk a lot about a lot of the pending issues to be discussed in that. How do you think the pandemic has changed the value proposition for trade, for creative industries within the trading services area? What do we need to highlight? What do we need to do as regions to have a stronger voice and not playing catch up, but also be right there into what is currently happening?
Thanks, Diana. And thanks very much to the other panelists. They raised some really pertinent issues. So for example, if you use if you understand the various modes of trade and services, mode one, cross-border, that's where the largest growth is taking place, increasingly because of digitization. But the areas where in the Caribbean and Latin America we've been strong, which is mode two, consumption abroad, meaning that tourists or visitors come to the Caribbean to access our content, with mobility issues or challenges with COVID, that's been on the decline and severely affected. And similarly, mode four, movement of natural persons, has been our biggest area of earnings in the creative sector. Our bands and other creative producers are traveling to other jurisdictions to offer their services. And that's been severely affected by COVID. So mode one in particular is an area where we haven't developed enough capabilities and capacities. So one of the hats I wear is that I'm the chairman of Caribbean Tales Worldwide Distribution. So we've been running an incubator for filmmakers in Toronto at the Toronto International Film Festival for more than a decade now. And what we've been doing is just what Alessandro's asking about, which is how do we prepare people to produce content for the marketplace? So that's what we do a lot. The work we do with all the filmmakers is say to them, okay, we know you have your pet project, but let us identify what the market wants and start from there. So we start from a demand perspective rather than a supply push perspective. So that's the first really important shift in the paradigm. Second thing we do is we put some of these producers in contact or put them into a network of who are the market, who's demanding these services. So it's not the final consumer, it's all of the intermediaries that Adrian talked about, the film studios, the investors, the distributors. If you don't get past that, those gatekeepers, you're never going to get to the final consumer. All right, so having a strategy, a marketing strategy about the gatekeepers and the intermediaries is absolutely critical in the creative industries. Once you've done that, then it's like, how do you collect your money? Increasingly, your income is generated through the utilization of or exploitation of your IP, copyright in particular, royalty income. So things like your copyright societies and beefing up their capacity is increasingly important. We are stronger in music in terms of that area, but even there, our capacity to tap into the earnings that is generated, let's say in the US market, is very weak because of the sampling methodologies used by the copyright societies there. And so that if you look at the data, the World Trade data and services, receipts from intellectual property is the fastest rising component of trade and services. And so IP is now the key source of income generation. And therefore, building our capacities in that area is really important. The other thing I would add is that just a few days ago, I did a presentation for the World Music Expo, WOMEX, which is happening in Portugal right now. And they've been asking me over the last 3 years to talk about fair trade in culture and fair trade in music. And at the WTO level and at the intergovernmental level, there are provisions for what we call preferential treatment for developing countries that we can be exploiting to a greater degree. And so I don't think we've been arguing that case well enough. The UNESCO Convention allows for that, but I don't think we've actually been hammering home the point. So things like provisions for artist visas or for exchanges, but also for investment opportunities are areas where we can do a lot more work. So we need our government people who work in ministries of trade, as well as ministries of culture, to come on board to make the argument. So it's not just an issue for artists and cultural entrepreneurs. We actually need our governmental sectors and our regional institutions to expand their role in terms of creating the pathways for the creative sector to really go global and stay global.
Thank you. Camille, we hear from the various panelists about this divide between the creative and the business side that must merge to be successful. So do you think the education system has some answers, are combining those elements, are helping people with developing their skills at the same time, also their business skills? Is there anything else we need to be doing?
I actually think that there's a lot that we need to be doing, again, because of the shift, because of what is going on in the world, and the traditional way of doing business that has been toppled on its head, right? So therefore, if we are teaching our students who are going to enter the creative world to support the industry on the traditional way or traditional financial systems, then it's not going to work, right? So I'll give an example. During Anime Carib Festival, we spoke about NFTs. I know I keep talking about it. We spoke about cryptocurrency. Now this is a real thing. It's not going away. If it does go away, it will evolve into something else. It is going to happen, and it is happening. But we were approached about funding and supporting projects through NFTs and through cryptocurrency. What are we going to do with that? If you don't have the persons in the traditional learning space understanding what that means, then of course it's not going to work, right? So I do think that I am absolutely 100% for education reform. That's what I do. That's my my voice. I talk about that because I am in the university. I am the head of animation at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is going to be a problem if we don't really look at approaching the economic deconstruction in schools, how we talk about the economies, how we talk about the creative economy without looking and investigating what is going on right now with money, how money is changing, how credit cards are becoming obsolete, how people are becoming billionaires in months because of these changes. So to answer your question, no, not enough is being done.
Thank you. Adrian, we hear there's sometimes a difference, Keith mentioned, between what we are creating in the region and what the market are demanding. And that is a challenge. We also heard Ramsey said they are asking for local content more and more. So whose story will we need to tell when we are creating, when we are trying to go to the market?
Okay, so that's a great question for sort of bridging some of the other comments that have been made so far. Alessandro has mentioned, for example, the important nexus between, say, the tech person, the creative person, and the business person. Then a case has mentioned on top of that, the role that governments need to play because they are the keepers of the policy environment. They are the shapers of the policy environment, and that should not be, but it is. So we're now starting to see that none of this exclusively is going to be controlling the shape of the future. The integration, therefore, of those agendas is extremely important. I want to mention, in terms of shaping that environment, that agenda, the fact that most of the Caribbean countries in their offers to the WTO quite unnecessarily, quite willingly, and I would add quite foolishly, gave away some of their rights over their airspace, and the digital airspace, that we are going to have to recapture because we did not value it at the time, and our whole communications sector was in fact left open to all sorts of predatory incursions. We're going to have to re-examine that. In terms of what stories we would tell, and again, I think, well, from my perspective as more of the creative than the tech side, I feel that there is a kind of dilution that is happening of what I call the West Indian legend, the Caribbean story. There's a superficial understanding of our journey, even among our own young people, and not enough imagination being applied. And I talk about imagination across the public and the private sector, the tech and the creative sectors. There's zero imagination being applied to where we are heading as a civilization, so that our milestones are vague, even in our own minds and the minds of our young creators who may be technically savvy and technically competent, but they are creatively unmoved. They are not energized by this amazing reality of the Caribbean civilization. And we heard earlier, I think it was Alessandro talking about, what does Latin America bring to the North American market? What does it have to offer? And if it is that hybrid understanding of what is possible as well as what has been, as well as what is needed, then we need to position ourselves as a region to be able to be uniquely placed to bridge that potential. And I'm not sure that we're doing that, because in our education curriculum, which was hinted at, well, more than hinted at by Camille, we are not creating a sense of history or even a continuum of what was to where we are now. So the appreciation of the deep literary treasury of the Caribbean, for example, which could provide amazing content in the digital age, in the digital market, in the on platforms across the world, there is insufficient knowledge of even the Walcotts or the Naipauls or the C.L.R. Jameses, or so many fantastic writers, Earl Lovelace, I mean, Chamoiseau from Martinique, I mean, the list goes on. So if we are not well placed to create new high quality content, and we are not very much aware of what has gone before us, then we are really not in a position to tell our story as post-colonial people, people of color, or even as citizens of the world who have a unique perspective of what is happening and what has gone before. So when you consider that all of the great stories of our times, I mean, you think of the movies, you think of music, you think of theater, all of these are set in the context of major milestones that have changed global perceptions. They have shaped eras, whether it's world wars or, you know, religious crusades or victories of whatever kind, the whole quest for nationhood of the Caribbean. And then the technological advances that are driving things like the Avengers series, that is one of the best-selling franchise in history. We have to ask ourselves, what are we selling? What is our story? What is the context that is going to drive creative content, apart from giving the market the banal, ordinary, everyday stuff that any number of people can provide, and who are going to compete with our creatives, probably from a more advantageous position. So if we are not deciding what's the next big thing for the Caribbean, what is the context from which we create, what is the history on which we draw, what is the literature from which we get to understand ourselves in the world, then it seems to me that we're disadvantaging a lot of the people who, especially young people, who have shown amazing capacity for adapting and adopting the technology, but what is fueling the content? What is the story that they are going to tell? Whose story are they going to tell? And are they even sufficiently engaged and aspirational and inspired to understand that their story too is relevant? I like to say that in the Caribbean, every life is a movie. But if we don't start to think of ourselves as worthy of that acknowledgement, then I think that we're doing ourselves a disadvantage. And that speaks back to what we're teaching in schools. It speaks back to how the entire apparatus of the state in many Caribbean economies is really just training workers for the treadmill. It is not training people to be owners. It is not training people to be controllers of the technology. It is training them to be ants in the long line of other ants looking for the next grain of corn. So deciding what's the next big thing for the Caribbean, to me, is a matter of leadership. It's a matter of the people who are well placed to have the discussion actually having the discussion. It is a question of people like Hilary Beckles, who are raising difficult questions and getting not much thanks for it. It is a question of Mia Motley, who's able to stand up and have Biden nodding in agreement and then holding her hand on the way out. The Caribbean has amazing things to offer the world, but we have to decide where we stand. What is our story? Are we the next creative mecca? Are we a tourism hub, and how do we leverage that? Are we a fantastic education node given our intellectual capacity, which is second to none? Are we an innovation capital, for example? Is that where we see ourselves going? Are we a digital dormer community? There's talk now of you can have a long stay visa and live and work in the Caribbean. Who are you working for? What are you going to produce? You know, are we a green haven? What's the next big thing for the Caribbean? How does that shape the work that people like Alison have to do, that people like Camille have to do in preparing the next generation? I think we need to decide that, and we need to draw our energies into some kind of vision which guides us and guides the allocation of resources, particularly in education, which I think is the is the key to everything that we will be going forward.
All right, thank you. We are running a little bit out of time, but we have a couple of questions more. Ramsey, how the Caribbean can compete in the global animation, Caribbean and Latin America can compete in the global animation markets. What do we have to do? We already are great consumers of that. So how do we?
Well, I think like that, you know, there's no like magic trick. If you look at the countries that have built successful animation businesses, almost every single one of them, except for the US, is built with a government support scheme that allows that growth to happen. Like whether that be tax credits or government funded development funds. You know, the French CNC, or in Japan, they have a lot of, they have their own industry that supports itself when it comes to like service countries like Montreal, Canada, and places like Montreal, 40% tax credits. In France, you can get 70% tax credits. Like the two factors when deciding where a project is produced, it come down to cost and talent. And you have to be able to get one of those right, definitely, in order to have a chance. So, you know, the amount of cost that you can charge is massively dependent on your talent pool, both as a country and as an individual studio. So, you know, those two things are very, very much connected. And, you know, I would say to everybody here that has any ability to speak to people who make those types of decisions, to really understand like what that is and how that really works, because you will not be able to compete unless you do it. You know, in India, there's been a growth over many, many years, many lots of money invested in growing that talent pool in India, but there's a fundamental cost benefit to that. And India, for a very short period of time, was extremely high quality for extremely low cost. And now the costs are growing there very, very quickly, to the point that salaries are increasing like 15-20% a year. And, you know, the fact is like, and that means that there needs to be somewhere else to make the shows that used to get made in India needs to now go get made somewhere else. So there's a massive boom happening in other East Asian countries. And you know, there's so many different projects in animation, whether you go for like a preschool TV show compared to like the high-end features, that there's different creative quality benchmarks for each of those cost price. You know, the cost per minute of each of those is reflected in the quality that you see on screen. And you just got to strategize where on that spectrum you want to be, or where you can be, and figure out how to effectively get there. And there is the talent to get to somewhere on that spectrum. Then the next question is, okay, well, what is the cost price point that allows us to really kill our competitors and build an industry off of that? And that's where I think government intervention comes in, because that you go, okay, well, look, we're match for match with, on quality, we can match the same quality as a studio in Bangalore, but their price is 20% less than us because they have a different local economy, they have different salary bands, they have all those types of things. That means that is the rate in which they can charge. So what do we do with our cost price in the Caribbean to leverage that to make ourselves 30% cheaper and undercut them by 10%? And what can the government do to do that, to bring that revenue in? And in all of these places, long term, that tax credit system works and brings in more money than it costs them at the end of the day. And it provides more opportunity, more employment, more people stay where they are instead of going somewhere else. And, you know, as you work up, you use that as a base level to build up your quality chain. And then once you can improve your quality because you've made a show, and now you make a better show, and then you make a better show. And it's just about gaining that experience and the people involved in shows to push themselves and your pipelines to develop, and you can invest more in technology because you actually have money to invest in technology in a commercial way. And it's like, instead of like these individual pockets of like, oh, we're going to do a little fund on like innovation here or a little fund on technology here. If you just create a tax credit shelter that allows you to bring in revenue that then companies can invest in themselves in a way that allows them to grow and be successful and competitive, then you can really compete on a global scale. And you can, and you know, to the point of the talent side of it, you also have to invest in education. Like there's no way in which you can have that base level unless you invest in education. And you have to do it at scale, and you have to collaborate, use, you know, the thing I've always said in all of these panels, whenever I'm involved in Caribbean conversations, is that it is not an individual island thing to solve. You have to figure out how to work cross island, and you have to figure out how to utilize the best skills of the people throughout the entire Caribbean in order to build an industry that can really increase their quality, just because of the scale of what you got, the size of the populations that you guys have, and the way in which each island can benefit each other by being able to say, oh, well, you know, we might specialize in this part of the pipeline or that part of the pipeline, or you just all specialize in everything and you just share talent in a different way. And you can connect studios like the way Europe does with European co-productions. You know, there's several movies that get nominated for Oscars every year. 10% made in France, 5% made in Belgium, 30% made in the UK and Ireland. You know, you can chop a movie up and make it in different territories, tap into different localized subsidies in Europe in order to do that. And that's how a vast majority of feature films in Europe get made, and even co-productions in TV get made in Europe, is because there's people from different countries utilizing their own experience and saying, okay, we have 30 really good animators in Barbados. We can do 20% of a movie. In Trinidad, we have another 30 animators that can do another 20% of a movie. And figuring out how to connect those groups to work together is a way in which you can really build a platform that can produce.
Right, thank you. Alessandro, just wanted to go back to the experience that you have had successfully taking your products to market. Do you have that business expertise in-house? Do you partner with somebody that has that business expertise? Do you have to learn it yourself? Just let's use your examples to see what can others in the region copy from that example?
Well, I will talk a little bit about how I got started into this. I've been teaching English for the last 20 years. And how I got started is I wanted to write a digital book. So I love video games. And I said, hey, why don't I, instead of writing a book, I make a video game? That was back in 2010. So I started contacting people and animators and people who were tech savvy, as I said. And then I started with my first project, but I didn't know how to make a game at all. I just designed the game and I got started with that. But then I realized that we finished the first project, but then I was asking myself, okay, how do I make a profit out of what I'm doing? And I start asking the professionals, right? The art team, people in the art team, the tech savvies, and I asked them, okay, how do we get this product to market? And they say, okay, there's Google Play, there's Steam, there are all these stores. And then we published the game, but we didn't make any money. I mean, we didn't successfully launch anything. It was in the big stores, but we were not making any money. And I said, okay, there is more than just launching the game or releasing the game. So that's how I got getting more involved with the US, especially the US market. And I started going to trade shows. I went to a lot of trade shows. I do a trade show every year that is called the Game Developers Conference. And in the Game Developers Conference, you learn about all the different aspects of the industry. And I focus on this area, on business development. And then I started working with different developers, and I realized that this problem of not talking about business or not knowing about business was not only in the Latin American region. There were European developers with the same problem, US developers with the same problem, Canadian developers with the same problem. They were good at what they were doing, but they were not good at doing business stuff. So I started kind of like interacting more with distributors, getting contact and trying to understand what the market wants and how everything works. And it's like Ramsey was talking, there are different scales where you can compete. I mean, in the video game industry, there's something called AAA games. I'm not here to compete with AAA games. I mean, AAA games like Fortnite from Epic Games, I'm not competing with them. They are not my direct competition at all. I compete with other level. It's like in soccer, right? There are different leagues. And I always said that we have to get started from the first one. So we are competing with indie developers from other regions. And that's how we successfully launched the latest, the last two games have been more successful than the first games because we were focused on where we were standing. So this is something very important to understand where you are placed, with the feet on the ground, and to understand how the market works. Because I talk with developers and I tell them, who are the 3 games that you compete against? And they say 3 AAA games. And I say, well, you're not competing with them at all. They are not, you are not in the radar, and they shouldn't be in your radar because you are competing with other types of games. So this is something that you should focus on and understand how everything is working out. It's like you are talking about NFTs, is like getting yourself exposed to what is happening, what is going on in the market. It's like the video game market now is moving towards a more streaming services, like Xbox Game Pass is doing. So they are trying to replicate the Netflix model in the video game industry. But the big publishers don't want to do that because they are in a better position if they are selling a $60 game every year rather than giving it to a platform like Netflix and making money out of this. But it's a good platform for small developers. So these big like Apple Arcade or Xbox Game Pass, they usually, well, not usually, they always have at least an indie developer in the portfolio every single month. So that's a place where you can compete. So these are the sort of things that you need to analyze if you want to get into a more business, I mean, to be more business oriented than just creating this stuff.
Right, thank you. The panel has been very interesting, but unfortunately we ran out of time. Before you leave, we are walking the talk. So we have a B2B session that was going to be actually the last part of this ALES virtual convention. So you have still a chance if you are a business in Latin America or the Caribbean, you have a chance to participate on the B2B. I will leave it to Alison quickly just to let you know how you can join and how you can participate before I pass it to Javier for closing.
Okay, thank you very much, Tiana. The link will be placed in the chat for persons to submit the applications. So as Tiana said, walking the walk, talking the talk, and I do recognize that in the chat, there's some of the suggestions made was about, linking the creators with distributors and investors, etc. So this is an opportunity for creators. We focus on the business and professional services, the ICT sector, the creative sector, green technology sector, to be able to meet with purchasers, distributors from Africa, Europe, North, South America, Latin America, Africa, and so forth. So it's an opportunity for us now to meet. And Caribbean Export takes this extremely seriously. And I believe, as Keith said, we are not we're thinking about creating, you're not producing for what you like, but producing for demand, understanding your demands, understanding the market, and so you produce accordingly. And also, you know, as it was said by Adrian, let's think about what is the next best thing. I would love to be guided or better guided on what is that next big thing that we need to be able to capture. And it comes in with, yes, your capacity building, your go-to-market, and then getting that investment, getting that distribution. And so as Caribbean Export, we want to continue to work on the development of the services sector, development of the creative sector. And, you know, I recognize that there's some persons from fashion within our participants. And, you know, as we talk about this digitization and creativity and technology, you know, we want to think about also about creation of designs and not only designers, because we do not have the capacity to really mass produce and for that distribution. So what about your designs and protecting it and intellectual property so that you can know it's no longer about a dress or the outfit that you make, but a drapery and the throw cushions, etc. You know, these sort of things we need to think about and how we utilize technology to change and to get into the market and where the demand is so that we produce accordingly. But all that being said, I wish we had a whole day to discuss all of this, but we do not. So I do look forward to all persons, as many as possible, if even you're not an exhibitor, because your sector is not covered, to at least participate as an attendee in that in our showcase and B2B that will be on 10th and 11th of November. So look forward to your registration and seeing you there, and continue to engage with us and see how best we can take the services sector forward. So thank you very much again to everyone and to all our panelists. It was excellent, excellent discussions.
Thank you very much, Alison and Tayana and the speakers. It was a very, very, very interesting. I enjoyed it very much. And see, according to my views, we have an opportunity for exporters and also for employees if you want to participate in this business of creativity. But what is very important is that in the last sessions, in the previous event, we have recognized that the global services sector have huge opportunities, and this in the creativity is not the exception. So this is a very interesting point. So we have the sector is growing. We have a lot of opportunities for employees and also for companies that wanted to export this kind of activities. So we need STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. That this is the technician part. We need creativity for employees. But I think one of the most important, perhaps, point according to this session is that we need also to think about the business model to be successful at the international level. And in this business model, we have to include IP. So thank you very much for Caribbean Export. Thank you very much for the Chamber of Argentinian and Commerce and Service and so on. Thank you, Tayana. Thank you, Sholanda. Thank you all the speakers. And it was a very interesting session. And I hope to be in the next year with you again. And obviously, don't forget to join the B2B session that Alison mentioned. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
You.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.